interrupt the crickets for this announcement. This is BTWRLM 256. That's right. That's right. Doesn't seem like you care. At least much. And some of you. We're going to do better. I mean, absolutely got to do better. Thank you for everybody who sent me emails discussing it. Coming from Clint Richardson's request to check out the broadcast. I do appreciate your interaction. And getting stuff done. That encourages me. And some of you acknowledge that it's not really that tough once you start laying it out. And I, again, have the problem of comprehensiveness of everything in life. And someone might not want to be interested in any one thing, just to get interest, to get people focused on a better path, and to protect ourselves. And you've watched how this thing all rolls out. So again, thank you this last week for everybody who also promoted the broadcast, given that it's a promotion, shared it, whatever you want to call it. In particular, BitChute this week, I don't know what happened, and thank you whoever was doing it to send it around. The numbers on that was a lot more. And to show you how this new, if you call it the censorship thing going on, is coming down and being rolled out. YouTube on the RLM account, I don't even think we got 15 views on the YouTube. In a place like BitChute, we got over 60, just over 60, which is actually an anomaly itself. Usually I don't do so well there. And again, at Minds, we broke over 100. So, and on Minds, thank you for the promotions and the helps and the bonuses there. And, again, I've been here 2017. Appreciate all that you've been doing. And on everybody else who's just reminding, you just click a remind and it broadcasts out through your channels. Very important. So this thing that's going on, whatever's happening on the internet and with all the big players and the big data and the big corporate conditioning that is certainly being using tools that were fostered, encouraged by the government. If we didn't even have the Vault 7 or maybe even Vault 8 WikiLeaks evidence, there is a motion going on that's going to limit the voice. So if you don't come in and promote and help and share and identify places to be and remirror these conversations, like normalization of ignorance, I found out, and maybe a couple of, if I don't mention you, it's just I haven't run across you. I don't mean to insult anybody. I just don't know how much to talk to and who's out there. I do appreciate all these surprise places that you pop up and put the broadcast, but there's definitely an attack. I told you I'll be interested to see when this broadcast go down, but it's going to be tied to the channel, the Real Liberty Media channel, and I don't know that. I think every week now I've been told that we're not being monetized on this stuff. I don't even know why we're being monetized, to tell you the truth, at one level, and then we're being restricted. So where I may get 150, 200, 300, when Vince was promoting the broadcast and doing what he was doing, we're getting 200 and 300 views. I'm down to 13 on YouTube. So the war of information is on. And my whole point here is, again, even though reallibertymedia.com is the home base, my position is beyond the media. I don't want you to be locked into these divisive type ideas, getting your own opinion on something to fight with anybody. I want you to understand the war that you're in. Literally, it's a war. Literally, there's no one there to help you. And you better figure this out on your own and understand the terrain as it is, not as you've made up in your mind or someone's told you as it's made up. And this is an ongoing thing. The war is and evolutionary engagement, I put in the blogcasters, is not a joke. You have to be fluid and adaptive to the things that you're around. And I'm not asking you all to go out and invent something for yourself to go fight, but you really need to look at the world. If you can't find something to be not liking enough to do something about it, I don't know. I mean, we all have that decision to make. We're all in our different conditions. If you have a family that you need to prepare for, well, you're going to only be able to put in so much time if you can at that. But your families are under attack, so my thought is you better be prepared somehow. And again, thank you for, the emails that come in, explain your problems. But I'm encouraged. You were able to handle the problem. And then now it's looking for other ways to protect yourself. That's all I'm bringing here behind the woodshed. And I'm being told that Grimner LRM is not monetized, and that's cool. But I don't know why we're being restricted as well, given the content. And I don't know. I'm not into really fighting it at this point, and it wouldn't be my place either. these companies, to me look like they're in violation of the Congressional Act of foreign propaganda organizations, and now I've identified them as domestic propaganda organizations where they actually start to censor all input or something that's not their belief. So any of you that would be interested, there's an avenue of that to go in. So you're going to necessarily have to round up the wagons. Anybody who wants information, and I don't talk left or right. I think that's the exploitation. In fact, that was just a Twitter. Kim.com mentioned something about left-right, focusing on Fox News versus CNN, and my problem with all that is that you're sitting in the left and the right don't exist. In fact, I should bring it up. I think I said all we're looking at is the exploitation of mankind with these things, and we can buy into that stuff. We can waste a lot of time in it. We can fight amongst ourselves, or we can start understanding that there's a greater thing going on. And if you think I'm saying go in and do it the way I'm saying it, and that's what the object is, then you're missing my point too. I've said over and over, this is a multi-dimensional battle. Some things are just to get you to get back in the game in the right way so you become effective. That's not the object. That's just the means to the end. And so some of you, again, you fight with me and you argue with me, or whatever it is you do against me, you're missing the whole and entire point. I don't really care how you go about it. Just do something correct. More correct even. I don't know about correct, but more correct. It's like the truth, the truth movement or whatever. It's been truthier. It's a bunch of nonsense. You either better get in and focus your mind and put your own blinders on onto that narrow path. But that's a path of cause for you. It's a path of purpose, intention as well, persistence. It's an endless path. It's the end of your life. I mean, when this is done, you're going to go to the bar, you'll ask them for a whiskey. Boy, that was a hoot, wasn't it? I need a drink. I hope you end up having to think about it like that. Again, what if our whole object here is that we just have to fight and we're born into an oppression. Are we going to commit to it, to be the accessory to it, just to subsume ourselves into it, or are we going to be the resistance of it? Are we going to help defend others that may not be able to? Now, we're going to do it, and my thought is you're going to do it in very intelligent ways. You're not going to throw yourself onto the pyre and just say that was the option. That's never the option. Never. I don't know where that gets into people's ideas. I just go ahead and I'm going to do this just to stick it to the man. Well, you were supposed to be the man. And no derogation to women. We didn't understand that's all there was. In fact, when you look at law in the legal, they moved the law into legal, and then they started civilizing everything. They had to make women men. If you don't look real careful. And so women don't understand there's an insult on them at all. This is just I don't know how deep to explain this except for just to explain it. I can't prove that to you. You'll have to prove that to yourself. And I only offer things I don't try to make the big mistake here, and I don't think I ever have. But you really, when I say you have to read the black and white, I'm not joking. You have to go see it for yourself. It just happened again this week at the association meeting. It's once you have the eyes to see this stuff, it just takes an instant to start picking up things. I had a guy hand me a letter that he'd gotten from the county, and I just look at the caption. I can see all the fraud right in the captions. His first two sentences had all I needed to see between the top of the caption and the first two sentences. It's less esoteric. It was a property issue, code enforcement. They admit it was your meaning the guy's property, your property, and yet they're claiming to be a development service. Now, how does a county have any authority over his private property? They've admitted it's his private property. What are they doing but the felony and coercion I've told you? And so I outlined real quickly how he moves from the first two sentences in the first paragraph, that's all there was, 2 sentences, into showing how they're doing a felony and presenting that show cause how you're not the felon that this law says you are. You use their stuff against them. You're not entering it at all. You're not even at that point developing a status. You're actually going to eventually, if he moves farther, you're going to identify the status as a fraud that they impose upon you. Everyone's looking for a status and an identity. Stop all this, please. Stop killing yourself. And boy, am I off my tabs. This is how it happens, folks. This is just live and inspired to do certain things and certain thoughts come to me. and I guess my mind goes kind of blank, and I'm dealing with all the technical parts, and my mind just is flooded with information to start to discuss, notwithstanding what I thought I was going to set up. But I can get back there soon. It's not too hard. It's all the same processes. It's fundamentally is all the same processes to get back what's been stolen from us every day. And I'm only asking you to stand up and defend yourself, and do it in ways that are a whole lot better that I see that are being done than what they are in denial. I see lots of people deny. You deny it even when you misunderstand something, and you tell yourself you think you understand. There is so much to understand about this stuff, and I guess that happened in the chat room about understanding, standing under. Well, you better decide what you will stand under. That's the first thing, and then you identify what's trying to force you to stand under, and that is all contextual. You don't just put out a blanket maxim, I don't stand under because I don't understand, and that solves it. That's never going to solve it. That's an objection you need to have an answer for. This really boils down to the rules of evidence, as it occurs to me. You want to learn how to do a lot of this? Go read the rules of evidence, and then maybe even the first 10 or 15 will probably be all you actually need, although sometimes not. And you start to analyze the rule of the world, the actions that come at you, relative to those rules of evidence, and you start understanding how to respond pretty quick. You start to understand the distinctions between what's impertinent, immaterial, and irrelevant. You start knowing when to use them. You start knowing how to identify the elements in order to see someone trying to come against you or makes a statement against you, how to tear into that and show them, and you show how they're coming falsely. Never taking on the status. Never claiming anything. Throwing the statuses off, actually. And then only taking any status that is beneficial to you. As I've explained to other people when we talk about mining and the status of the one accepting the grant, the grantee. When you understand the law behind grants, you know that whoever's granting you that is a stop from interfering with you, and that happens to be the government. Now you're probably sitting in the most powerful place you can be in the fog of all the other stuff we've been told. Why I keep there and I explain it to people. Why I keep focusing on that. If you don't focus on something that shows what you will stand under and upon, you're nothing. You're a ship out in the ocean without a rudder and a motor. And so it's not just about being out there taking one for the team. That's the wrong way to do it. It's not out there just being adrift either. But it is. You do have to plot your path. You have to have a path and you have to plot it. And if you don't, there's going to be people there to take you down. And whether you think that backing off and doing nothing is the answer, and you tell yourself that, you're mistaken. That's all I can tell you. You may disagree with me, but that's the way this ends up working. And I've said some of you may squeak out. Most of us won't. In fact, I didn't in the beginning, and that actually inspired me to continue. Maybe to some extra bit than maybe most people do, but here I am, and I've dedicated myself to do that. And I see the world in a whole different thing. I can see the beauty in the world, but I can see what man has done to himself. And as we said, you're going to get on the left-right paradigm or any type of split division. You're just falling to be, and you don't. And there's an interesting thing: you can't be one or the other or neither. You have to take a position, but it can't be to support those three: the one, the other, or the neither. The neither has in its capacity some other that's a division. You have to be outside of that, but you have to engage that without engaging it. It's really, there is no spoon, folks, like in the Matrix. This is really an interesting interaction that we have to do. It's hands-on, you have to get involved, but there's nothing you're touching. And that's trying to come against you is the ghost. It's that straw man crime against you. That I say, if you really listen to what I'm saying and don't keep interjecting what you think, and actually start listening to the point you apply what I'm saying in some small way just to get the feel for it, just to get familiarized, just orient yourself to it. You'll understand really more of what I'm saying, and that you can't take the opposition, the opinions, the opposition that you do without whatever I might say until you put something in practice. And as this is one of the themes to quite a few people I was talking about this last week, it's over and over and reoccurring. It's always going to be there. Every case is different. There is no silver bullet, and then there's no set up application for anybody. It's how the facts establish themselves and then how you apply law, whether that's against you in the moment of the imposition or how you're going to turn that around as a violation to you. So this is what I speak to behind the woodshed for anybody that hasn't heard this before. All of you that have listened before, you understood me to talk this way. I guess this week I'm a little bit astonished about how long I've been talking about perception, about how to perceive things, what's going on in the world, how to find it, how to prove it to yourself. And there's still this mentality of almost denial, and then you start seeing it. And it takes such a long time. I'm dismayed at that at some level, amazed at the other, and yet here we are. Things that I've been saying for years, I hear people coming to awarenesses of in other places also. Not even seemingly come from me. And I go back and say, well, this is the stuff I've been talking about. I'm glad that they've come around, but, look how long, years and years of delay that's coming to come to the point when you finally realize the reality of the war you're sitting in. And now what do? It's a shock. I'm not judging any of it. I'm saying this is how we have to go. This is what you have to go through. And if you're arguing with me, you're wasting time. If you just don't understand what I'm saying, you think it doesn't pertain, or you have a better thought, I have to say that you're wrong. And I have to say it from my research and what I do that proves that wrong. If you have no matter of what I do, maybe you're not in the game at all or don't intend to be. Now that's another interesting one. We claim to be questioning everything, claim to be knowledgeable about things, and then we really don't step forward at all. And I don't know about that one. That's just a difficult one. And I'm not here to force anybody, certainly. But it's always the conundrum of, are you going to step up and do something or not? I mean, are you going to accept the crime around it? You're going to accept crime to happen to other people? Now I'll get to my tab. Just on that point, remember I was talking about this, Blue Apron? They're going to start, the USDA, the government's going to now hand people that need food a box of food. And I told you at that point, they're going to be now giving the manufacturer, the processors of processed food that's been shown to be no good. That's the food that they're going to hand? The story about the government cheese? Where do they get that plastic stuff? Well, that's what's going to be in these boxes, as they claim that they're going to give people more nutrition and and reduce costs. It's all a lie, but we all tend to, who cares if I'm not getting that Blue Apron box? But here, I want to point out something here. This week it's coming, and I always find the consistency with how the information comes at us. We can put it together if we want to. And whether you want to understand this for yourself or you want to understand it for somebody else, whether or not you ever get a Blue Apron box, whether or not they even put it out there. See, if we put it out there that we show that the Blue Apron box is no good for anybody or anything that looks like it, and we got the evidence like I'm going to show you, and you have become vocal about it, vocal local, you can start shutting all this stuff down by your focused energy. If you shut up or don't do nothing, say it's someone else's job, we will all perish at some perishable, because nothing in this box that's coming is going to be perishable. But as an example of how this works, they come up with the plan, they've got the outcome. Everybody in fact, I was just listening to this on the broadcast, not before on Thursday, but before on Sunday, that they were talking about the Hegelian dialectic. And then they go the problem action solution, which is the trite little point, or they go synthesis, antithesis, and solution, whatever. Well, that's just the idea that I tell you there's the method that they've used to take you down. I want you all instead to go look at the term praxis. This is long ancient stuff. Praxis. In fact, those of you tuning in that are from Clint Richardson, you might get interested in that. That's utilizing the philosophies and transitioning from one point to another. And they do it right in front of you without you seeing it. That's what we're talking about. It's not really the Hegelian dialectic. That's just been the promoted one, so that you don't look behind it. Okay? Always these false fronts, folks, is all I can tell you. You just gotta look through. They're transparent to most everybody, and that slaps you as the ghost. The ghost slaps you, and then you start getting all frustrated about it, instead of saying, wait a minute, here comes the ghost. This is the puff of wind. I'm just gonna step aside it. Now, I'm not gonna let that happen to me, but here we are. They're going to promote the Blue Apron, the Blue Box, the new food provisions the government's going to offer instead of the EBT card. And here's the story here: U.S. Agriculture at a glance, the USDA report. And I'm just going on a simple chart, and they show the number of farms and average farm size in the United States. And the two lines are number of farms, and the other line is the average farm size. And they show that the number of farms are going down dramatically. I guess 45-degree angle is pretty dramatic in my mind over time. It's a 7-year span. And the numbers we're dealing with are in the millions of farms. And at the same time that the number of farms going down, the average size is going up. Now, that immediately doesn't say this on the report and on the chart, but if you do some research, you realize what they're doing is they're getting rid of the small farmer. Remember, I told you years ago, the USDA guy, I don't remember his name now. Excuse me, the name's flopping around but not coming to me, but he said he went to the people in the middle of the Midwest and said, "You're politically inert." He told them, "You are no force in effect on what we do now." That was a couple years ago. Well, what they're doing is they're monopolizing they're causing monopolization of the food production, and they're going from companies that own larger farms and less of them. So those are all, again, a focusing point that we now have an outcome for about who's going to be providing your food and by what standard. You absolutely know that a corporate standard is going to be corporate profit-driven and not for nutrition. Then they'll have all the low bar. I keep telling you about the way they do this. They have the low bar of nutrition, or the whatever they deem to be nutritious or whatever. They have the low bar, the high bar of pesticide because they can pollute a little bit. They have the military production or examples and exceptions under Title 50 that says they can do that to you, even as an experiment. So you start tying this together, it's not really hard to come away that you're just in a way, if you're not a lab rat, you're certainly the exploited, the military, the object of the military exploitation. And the bottom line of all this thing is also that it was commerce driven. I keep telling you all this stuff. I don't know how much it kind of sinks in. You got to put it all together. It makes perfect sense. And I say that not in absolute. Just that when you put these together, it makes perfect sense in that category, those lists of facts. There's other ways to construct a list of facts and other facts to list in order to see other levels of type of oppressions or whatever the methods of destruction, exploitation. Again, we're just victims of the exploitation we allow. And when we develop these divisions amongst us, we're showing the proof of that exploitation success. So here we have more number of farms going down, the number of average farms going up. That typically, in my research, has shown the monopolization of corporate food processing, which anybody may just readily agree to. You'd have to go search that for yourself and find the fact if you're interested. And here was the next story coming from the same website, actually. Now, what is this food distribution to people? When you look out around your country and you see that more and more people are trying to get on, they have to get onto subsidies. I told you, the 29-hour rule. You're going to get part-time help and then you're going to get 29 hours. Why? Because they don't want to give you your health care. Now where are you going to get your money? So you can be going, I told you this was all happened years ago. I said you're going to be having millions of people working and still have to go get so-called food stamps. Now they got this EBT condition, SNAP. Well, there's other systems that have already been in place. And in particular, there's an evidence of the Indian reservations underneath the USDA and what happens when they get provided food. And so here we have that story, food distribution program on Indian reservations. A prototype for the harvest box? Not exactly. Now, this report, again, I could read this stuff. I just want to explain. I want you to read it. And on that point, thank you for the interest in the blogcaster last week where I inadvertently omitted the link to the 3 questions I didn't read regarding the Portland police and how I respond to that in a FOIA. I had added that information onto my tabs. I forgot to actually include it. The request was made to do it. If those of you wanted to see what those 3 questions are in the link and what I responded in writing, so you can see how that looked and how really efficiently and short that statement was to answer those 3 full questions, go to the blogcaster last week and go find the Portland police story and the FOIA. But going into here, we have this USDA provides food under a different program to the Indians. And there's a report here you'll read what they provide. And it sounds all altruistic. I'm going to read part. The program was designed. This is the food distribution program on Indian reservations. And if you listen to Walter excuse me, I just forgot his name, Means. I don't know why Walter popped up, but that wasn't. Russell Means, excuse me. Apologize. Russell Means told us, he admitted to and found that we all live on the reservation, folks. We all live on the res. And I have a hard time arguing against that. So here's a perfect example. When as they move this thing along through time, and they slowly move Praxis upon and through, use the method of Praxis to get you to realize, and they realize their new paradigm for you, your new existence. They put all these things on. They sound pretty good. That this food distribution program on Indian reservations, the program is designed as an alternative to SNAP for low-income Native Americans living in remote areas without easy access to grocery stores. The food boxes delivered were filled with canned, shelf-stable foods like peanut butter, canned meats, and vegetables, and powdered eggs and milk. Its consequences, folks, and this is where you start connecting up the monopolization of farmland, the integrated process of manufactured processed foods, the products of which they start making sure that everyone starts to get. They create an economy that requires you to have to go to these places, otherwise you either don't eat or you starve, or you turn yourself into the 30s in the Dust Bowl. You turn out to what they planned this out like it was a natural consequence of austerity. What's the consequence? There was a high prevalence of overweight type 2 diabetes on Indian reservations. What did I tell you the weeks before, and overtime the weeks before that? All this stuff that the reportings I report to you, the notice they tell you about what they do is meant to make you unhealthy. Well, that certainly fits into the bottom line reports I've been telling you all along. So if you don't get a handle on this, and this is a tested thing. This is not just an opinion. People that receive this kind of food turn out to even have a body shape. What do they call that? It looks like commode or something. Oh, it's common bod. Commode bod. A common bod. That's even the name. There's a name for it. It's called common bod. That's what we call it because it makes you look a certain way when you eat these foods. It can't be something you should turn your gaze from. That is the program. They're talking now. They're letting it out that they want to put on anybody who needs help. And I'm telling you, this is including the 29-hour workers, the workers that have jobs that can't make it with their low minimum wages, notwithstanding any minimum wage, and also the amount of hours they get, as I told you was planned coming into this since at least when I started broadcasting. All this was in the law coming, folks. It was all done. So here's the evidence right off the bat. These food programs, these are monopolized to promote the bottom line of corporate type farming. Processed food, high processed food, and these government provided things are not healthy, and they have other delirious effects. I can't remember now. Oh yeah, here it is. I'm trying to just roll through half. I'll just read it. Culturally inappropriate food, poor quality ultimately, notwithstanding their claim of nutrition. Induced dependency. Would you think of that, folks? This is how they do this. They induce the dependency by pushing you into this. Undermine traditional diets. Which, folks, we've made it all the way to here on traditional diets. Why would we think the government can provide it better in a box? Part of barter trade economy. Unwanted items are bartered, traded, and sold as fed to pets. So it doesn't even really reach the point. Besides, how are you going to afford the dog food you're needing assistance in food? You're going to have to feed your pet anyway. Well, this is the unwanted stuff. So they give you unwanted things, which is certainly part of that list. So when I'm talking about this for you all, and you don't get SNAP, or you have a nice job, and you've got lots of time, and maybe you get full time, and you get health benefits, I want you to consider that there's a whole gob of people out there that don't have any of that. And we're slowly being changed. Our society is being altered to have to take on this thing, and this thing is planned for a consistent degradation of the people around you. And I just want to point out to those of you who may be better off with that, may not think it affects you. When you get people down into that point, then you have more problems in society. Government will be there, and it will claim to solve it, but all that was done, it's the ripple effect. It ends up coming out of your pocket and out of your servitude to more regulation. And then the fear that if they're not there to protect you, because you think that that's their duty, then you're going to be in trouble. And they get any more leverage. They do that all in the West. The sheriff's office, we got no money to protect you. And all the old folks say, I need to have you protect me. but there's no duty in it. So here's to me, it's just, again, it's just the trick they pull. It's the trick they pull that everybody uses. The same thing they call these boxes nutritious. The evidence shows counter. No one goes and speaks about this in any forceful way or moves the remedy past the objection when it's ignored by the agency. And you get these kinds of decisions. But here's the fact that I've been telling you, if you start working this right, no matter what the subject matter area is for you, and I was hitting the 420 crowd for the DEA, the Kratom people, if you want to protect your marijuana, which you haven't done, maybe go protect the Kratom, since you didn't get in on the cannabis thing. The Kratom needs some help. Well, somebody did what I was saying. I didn't contact them. They were doing this on their own. I want to just point out, somewhere out there, someone understands how this works, and here is part of the story. Court decision could lead to EPA banning water fluoridation. Big headline here. EPA is national, banning water fluoridation from a court decision. All right, so someone went in and understood that these acts of Congress mean something, and in this act of Congress called the Toxic Substance Control Act, there's a provision for people to make the agencies look at particular things for their safety, certainly, within, again, the police powers of the federal government. And understand, this distribution of water is a commerce thing. Whether or not the EPA is actually constitutional, you understand your water supply is now in commerce here. And so a federal court has denied an attempt by the Environmental Protection Agency to dismiss a lawsuit seeking a ban to the use of fluoride under the Toxic Substance Control Act. What they did not and ignored a petition to counter that. Of all the years I've been talking, how many of my listeners have put a petition before the EPA to stop the fluoride they know is poisoning people? It's all the listeners that had that as a thing in their craw that were useless to everybody. Don't mean to insult anybody. I'm just telling you this is how this works. That they've been doing fluoride, and there was a method that you could go in and you could bring this about if you were interested enough, more than just whining about it, to bring it up as a question. And whether or not I actually like these people, because I haven't researched them, but these guys with these names are really troubling. Water Watch Incorporated, they brought a lawsuit, and they challenged the EPA's failure underneath that act in order to look at fluoride. So here we also see the admission that the government does not work for you, doesn't work out to be for you. It works out to sell another product to the water distribution systems that they don't care that it harms you. In fact, it harms you in a way that advances their governmental cause, doesn't it? And so again, Title 50 is right here in my mind. Someone asked me in order to go through it. I've asked you to go read it yourself. Don't read very carefully for the exceptions of the government being able to hurt you. If you don't want to be doing the reading, Clint Richardson did, I think it's Lethal Injection, about 20 minutes in. He reads at Title 50 and explains to you how these vaccines and things are imposed upon people if you don't have a better word in your mouth, as I've been saying all these years. So here's a point where the government's not going to help protect you, resistant to protecting you. If you didn't take that as a notice, I don't know what to say, but there was a remedy. Now, I don't know where this is going to end up. I'm just saying that I think that if we had a lot more people that got more than shooting off their mouth about what they don't like, they actually looked at where they could enter in on these even narrow points and made a case, made the record, made it noticed to people. I don't know how this affects people. When I read the title, a court decision could lead to the EPA banning water fluoridation. Those of you that know fluoride, you can't think this is a small title to a story. And I'm asking you all, for those that were really into not wanting your little ones to be destroyed by fluoridation, where were you that you didn't bring this up? Especially those that have been listening to me. I've told you a long time ago, and I don't mean this in any judgmental way, it's just going to be the fact. Between friends, I'm condemning you all. I'm condemning all of you. And that's just the way this is going to work. And I still love y'all. Because this is just us. And we're handed all the tools if we know where to find them, and we don't help ourselves. That's a frailty in us. That's being exploited. And that's why I say that's on us. I've always said this. Again, I can point at all the other things. I can call them all kinds of names and I can do all kinds of things, but remember those those fingers pointing back. So, behind the woodshed, we get the lickings here, what you should have done, that you didn't do, given you think you want to make the claim that you were against fluoridated water. And you see, there is a response from the system. This wasn't even doing all the challenges that I wouldn't allow in myself, but this is even going within the system of it. Where this turns out, we'll see. Because remember, this is not much different to me than DAPL and all the other administrative impositions that have points of remedies for challenge. It's not that hard. And in fact, one of the emailers has said, this stuff really isn't that hard to understand. It's just taking the time to look at it. And then my addition would be, yeah, that's right, and then implementing it properly. And it's not a lot of work in some regard. It's really just, it's kind of like the parry in fighting, in sword play or something. You don't really fight. You just set it up to where you step aside, and there's nothing there you're not standing there when they come down with the sword. It's a different, like Aikido. They come at you. You do your jujitsu on them, and then they're on the ground. And as I showed the guy in the association meeting, a property owner, it was not took longer to explain it than to see it. Within 3 steps, we had the guy who had sent the letter from the government. We had him having to answer to 2 felonies. As I keep telling you, it's all the same stuff. And I didn't even get to all the status stuff. See, status may be irrelevant. You don't have to put that on you to answer. As I told another guy, I said, why are you putting all these statuses on you when you're innocent of all of them? There's a whole different thought process in my mind that's going on that I see most anybody discussing in the chats or with me that I'm hoping I eventually will convey to most people. Listen to what I'm saying. Again, it's not my research and my judgments are not to replace your own. I'm saying if you don't begin at least where I'm providing experiential observations to you, you're probably wasting a whole lot of time. I guess maybe I should just put it that way. You're just probably wasting just a ton of time. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing anything. I mean, I don't know what to say more to that. That's the beginning and the end of your so-called journey. You haven't taken the first step. And yet, maybe someday in the future you're oppressed and didn't get geared up. You weren't trained. You didn't train yourself for this. Not that you're looking to invoke it. You just want to be prepared. Or you were in something and then you did it all wrong. And then, as I tend to get as the last guy I was talking to, well, we're at the 2-inch line on our own goal line. What do I do? That's when I get them. Boy, that's difficult. And I look at it and say, okay, we're going to make a touchdown on the next play. They're not going to get it. They're not going to get the 2 points, and they're not going to move the ball for their 6 points. On the 2-inch line, folks. And I don't do Hail Marys. Well, no, I might make it look like a Hail Mary, but you're going to find out if you're messing with me that it wasn't. And so, this is all part of the battle. But I don't give up. Because there's an ultimate crime against all of us. And when we start to see that crime, it doesn't matter if I'm on the last half-inch line. There's a crime against you. You just have to quickly get it moved out into the record and move it along. And that gets you running down the trail again, or it's a big pass. It's a pass to a target that's going to make the score. And so what I'm telling you is all multidimensional issues it's conditioned by your ignorance of those other levels and a future action. As I was talking to someone, it was the same gentleman in the association. He was talking about these things and these steps, and I said, well, okay, so what I've offered you eliminates everything you said, and I'm already talking to you about if they ignore all this at the state level, I'm talking about your appeal. I'm setting up your appeal with what you're doing today. And so there's this other lack of awareness in people that I see very clearly that needs to be done. It's not that much more work, actually. It's just a part and parcel of the thought process, the reasoning behind how you approach someone who's coming to attack you. And literally that it requires the evidence to counter it, whether that evidence is the law, the printed objective basis, the law, whatever you call it. It's the rule, the code, the statute, whatever you call it. The thing that the other side, whoever the imposer is, has to follow. You put that up against them as a violation, and all of a sudden you've got the table starting to turn. And what they'll do is they'll try to do all the evasion, and they'll try to duck and cover, and your job is to not let that happen. So here's the condition where the government is, again, I think this is an evidence. I would use this, I would put this in my bag of proof. The EPA isn't concerned to do what's right, or to even entertain what might be better. And apparently it was properly argued that a court is going to confirm that, and we may, on a national level, not have the standard of fluoridation that we've suffered with as a people, and how untold harm that's been put on it when it does get relieved. That nobody listening to me couldn't have been the one that started this, or it jumped in to help these people otherwise. So, more things coming about our life, and the bottom line is really not about you, and they really don't care. And I told you, be careful of this situation with your data. And just a quick statement, another 2.4 million Equifax consumers have data stolen in the massive leak. Again, this is a U.S. consumers thing. The United States, it tells you, because it's a commerce thing, it's supposed to sit there to protect you. But they lied to you when they told you even 140-something million got whacked for this. There was even 2.4 million more. So this is, when these problems, economic and digital problems happen, they're as comprehensive as the EPA wrongly imposing fluoridation and not caring. They don't care. And that should terrorize everybody at some point. The government doesn't really care. The government is not there to protect you. I don't know why this is so hard for people to truly, truly, truly deeply understand, and why it takes so long for people to understand that. And I guess what I started to focus on this week was some acknowledgments of the fact that people started to see this whole point. I don't know where, I'm just dismayed. I've been talking about this for years and years and years. And nobody refers to what I've been saying, nor did they do the study, and all of a sudden one day somewhere else they hear, oh, this is not what you thought was right, ain't. How many titles have I done what you thought that was so that wasn't? What you thought that was the right thing to do that isn't? So, along with this digital data things and these leaks and all this other stuff, we've been moving on a little bit about what we thought about being protected. And when we go on this information highway, okay, so if it's a highway, it's a franchise, and its systems are sitting in a franchise of another highway that was the people's creation for the people's utility, and I think there's the avenue there to get into these companies, notwithstanding their private nature when they're violating everybody. But how you go through the Internet, you want to do it sound anonymous, and I've said the Tor browser has been available to us. There was a little report that pops up, someone who did some research. Interesting disclosure has been found, and a lot of documents you can download for those of you that are interested. What was interesting was what wasn't actually found, notwithstanding everything that was found. But if you want to go the so-called anonymously, I told you, be careful. It's pseudo-anonymity, so be careful on all this. They're telling us that. But it was shown that the people who are developing the Tor are actually getting paid by the United States government in the documents. I have not gone through the files. I don't have the time. It's not an interest of mine at this point. Although I do use the Tor browser. I use it for things, and since I'm not a criminal, I don't care. I'm just using it to prove that I was trying to be anonymous because there's a defense about that. If they ever wanted to fabricate, like they're doing right now at YouTube, fabricate that what you're saying is disinformation, defaming you as well on the YouTubes and wherever, on Twitter, wherever they are, to shadow ban us. This becomes it's a silent defense that's being built in just by using it, that you can then prove other things out if it ever comes to pass. So I don't do this because I think so. I do this in the eventuality it might. Now, it's not the only browser I use, but it's important because I do use it. And if you use it, you should be concerned about this, but also look at the limitations and what you can use on it, as we're going to need to stay on this Internet for a long time. This is why you need to support the network. And I don't know, I haven't talked with Grimner. If we broke it last week, maybe again, donate to the reallibertymedia.com, a couple dollars. If you got 100, fine. If you got 5, fine. Whatever you can do, keep the servers running. Again, I'm kind of extending what even Grimner was asking for. We usually just do February, but I just realized that, with all this stuff we're being foreclosed from, those of you that want to hear our voices, the hosts' voices on the networks that you do, you're going to have to transfer your indignation for some cash, at least for the hardware, if not for the help that comes in, the volunteers to keep it going. And that's to the networks that you listen to. But so the Tor became a question with this investigator. Someone dedicated his time to find and ferret this out, and he has a monstrous document dump he put out, not on WikiLeaks. But here's while the documents the documents do not show Tor employees was a comment out of one of his web pages. While the documents do not show that Tor employees provided backdoors into their software, they do reveal that they have no qualms with privately tipping off federal government to security vulnerabilities before alerting the public. It was probably the most astonishing thing to hear at the level of the balance between are they providing backdoors or not. Well, in the communication, these are FOIA communications between the people that are doing Tor and the government. There was no evidence that they were actually telling anybody that there was backdoors to exploit. Other than what you just heard here, the comment that they would find vulnerabilities and then let the government know. So that's the venue, that's the tool you're using, that's the vulnerabilities of it, and use that with a caution. But this is how, again, the frailty of our digital world and the frailty of the silent weapon for quiet war digital system that they want you to plug into, you will. So, again, how much you want to agree with that and disagree, it's not up to me. That's going to be your downfall if you disagree with me about not just not using the product or deciding to use it. It's understanding the game that you were in. This matrix, literally, this program that seems to be running. I don't want to necessarily go to the point that I don't think it's real. What I'm saying is that these are the analogs, the fairy tale analogs we're told to let us know that there's something out there, and essentially you can't ever be told that, you can't ever have the complaint you were never told. And that's partly my point. Listen, behind the woodshed, I'm condemning you. You can say you're not hearing it. You can claim you heard it later or somewhere else. The point is that you heard it, and then you didn't respond to it. And I'm only doing it not to force you to do anything. I'm saying there's an enemy out there that not to blow this up. If there isn't one, that's fine. But for the most part, people are having troubles. Whether you want to help, just help them as a good Samaritan, or yourself and prepare for an eventual thing, that is required. At some point, that is required. If you have any compassion or empathy. If you don't, then you're just another psychopath as far as I can tell. So I don't know. I don't know about that part. I'm not making that judgment. You are, you're not. That's all. I mean, it begins and ends there. So, digital weaknesses, the hacking, even the Tor browser, we talked about all this, is to be careful on using it. Don't think you're going to use it like it's some protection. Just use it to produce the evidence that you intended it to be private. That'd be probably the most I'd be using it for. I have a link to these documents. I don't know. I think if I remember right, the numbers are a couple thousand. When you go through all the links, you can download them. And read them yourself if you're interested. There's the communications between the government and Tor programmers through a FOIA request, folks. This is the other thing. Everything's in our hands if we were just to step up and take it. Instead of pointing our fingers at it, we use those same hands to do something, quit being idle about it and do something. All I'm looking at doing here is to try to get you interested in doing something. And some of you are already under the gun, and it's tough. But again, I just read how you guys work it out. Whoever you are, you write to me, and I read how you work it out. And you did work it out, didn't you? Take that as a lesson. I mean, that's a big one right there. You worked it out. However you worked it out. I would just listen to what I've been saying, and you'll notice within that what you did, either by plan or by accident. You'll see within what I'm saying, you did that to be successful. And you did other things, I'm sure. That's not the limit of it. But you eventually had to go through a couple-step process of identifying the wrong, of finding out that knowing it was wrong was the first thing, setting up the word in your mouth before they made you go do it wrong or force you to do it wrong. Then you identify the wrong, and then you identify how that wrong had an objective basis in showing there was supposed to be a limitation in law with regard to accountability. You identified that. And then you file that notice of all that's going on. You essentially did a pre-claim right there of a lawsuit. You start doing that, and those of you that I can read through your stuff, you did that, whether you know this or not. And it wasn't that hard, actually, and you're just fighting the oppression. And it's overwhelming at the time, but you become successful, and you're just looking at the method. You already got it. The only distinction about that and anything else is the subject matter of, and who might come against you and their willfulness against you to be the criminal. And there's nothing I can say more to that than you just have to be more on it. So what about this, the digital, the non-anonymity, conditioning, the looking in, the so-called hacking, which may not be a backdoor, but is really an advanced notice of a vulnerability that's exploited. Again, all this is exploitation, folks. It's just exploitation. It's like human trafficking. I don't care where you look at it. This is what the government is. The bottom line. And for all kinds of reasons. But we have a report here that YouTube secretly using the SPLC to police videos. SPLC is the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so they're supposed to be the conscience of the world now, and the government and the YouTube. And I found this to be a pretty interesting story. You may need to read why, how this is coming down in YouTube. In others, I don't know why it's not called the boob tube right now. It's just like the other one that we don't watch anymore. But anyway, YouTube is getting help from the left-wing Southern Poverty Law Center in an effort to identify extremist content. So I go through and read all this stuff, and those of you that have had your channels taken down or threatened, or like we are now seeing, we're not cut off at Real Liberty Media YouTube. We're just not getting promoted. We're getting restricted. We're not getting the coverage. Actually, everybody who mirrors our stuff is actually getting more coverage than the network itself's website account, or the YouTube account. But they're using, apparently, this SPLC's manpower, if you will, woman power, whoever it is, interference power, and they're in league now with this group, the left-wing nonprofit, which has most recently come under fire for labeling legitimate conservative organizations as hate groups, is one of more than 100 non-governmental organizations and government agencies in YouTube's Trusted Flaggers program. A source with knowledge of the arrangement told the DC. It was the Daily Caller. So here you see the word NGO, folks. You don't become an NGO without being aligned with the United Nations. Now we can go off on who these people are. If you go and look at their history, they've been pretty solid in going after certain types of law cases, and that's why they got their notoriety. But my view on this, and certainly if they're making their promotion, their guidance, their policy for their rulemaking and how they implement this has been taken and honored by its implementation by YouTube. We now have it's not beyond conspiracy. We have this collusion. So what you have to now look for is where the Achilles heel of the collusion is, and we see it in the organization deeming hate groups. Hate groups would have a definition. So I went really quickly just to kind of blow this through. Just wanted to see what would I find if I wanted to address this problem, not against the SPLC, but against the private businesses, which everyone knows it's a private business. They get to say, so that's true. I've said that myself. But when they disclose a certain thing, make a condition that they violate, and then as I would tie it together, being on the public franchise of the utility, being able to use the phone system, the backbone, which is on the public utility, you start to connect these up, we may have a lot stronger issue to address those that might want to. That my observation when I went and looked around with the SPLC and their claim, in the story that I have a link to, it says SPL's claim to objectivity is nothing less than fraudulent. So you realize that when I was reading the article, I saw the hate groups, and hate groups is pretty neutral. I mean, there's really no definition. It's ambiguous. It's an abstraction. It's arbitrary and capricious. What can I say? It's just not really it's just an unusable word. It's all subjective, certainly. And so here it is, right? In the story, I find this little section that there's other people that are claim that objectively is nothing less than fraudulent, their claims. And then I looked and went and do research what they said. What it turns out to be is this little phrase, and I put this in a Twitter. You get the link if you want to see it. And my question to the poster before me, or actually, in a condition of everyone was kind of talking to this, and I just put a Twitter out of this, and I said this about this problem with the arbitrary and capricious title of a hate group. My question, and you know my questions are rhetorical. They actually have the answer within the frame of the sentence of the question. So my question, how are YouTube and Google not a domestic disinformation operation having, quote, beliefs or practices that attack or malign an entire class of people typical for their immutable characteristics, close quote. Where did I get this quote? But at the SPLC's website as their definition. Is the very same thing the SPLC and YouTube and Google are doing to those that can identify their immutable characteristics. And so my if you will, just listen to what I'm saying on the Twitter, not all the time, it just information sometimes goes out, but in this particular case, I was putting the seed of the beginnings, the seed of the germ for how you would start to begin to address this problem. At least start throwing it out there that this one-sided thing they're doing, notwithstanding the private nature of it, truly is baseless, and it starts to become criminal when you turn that hate group by their own definition into a defamation. And you're harmed by all the content being brought down, the speech that's now mischaracterized and mistreated unequally. And also, I don't know if people are understanding this. They threatened to take down, I guess, Alex Jones's website. I don't know how much a hype that was. Twitter came right back, YouTube came back. We're not intending to do that. But it occurred to me when they said 33,000 videos would be pulled down, all the time that would be stolen in building upon the representation by YouTube that you would have a place, all the time that may be able to be claimed by anybody wanting to try, for the amount of time that's deleted, contrary to their representation, based on this statement that actually is a standard that is applicable, again, to even you being censored. And if you start to understand how this works, I think you start to see a better path more clearly on how you start to address what seems to be just one massive victimhood as I see this. People just accepting that's the way that's all there is. It's inspired the alternatives of the alternatives. In other words, I have to look for them myself. That's why, again, Free and Slave said, well, why don't you just get over to Minds.com and preserve the name? Okay, I'll do it for that reason. Well, it's turning out that Minds.com is a place that people want to hear the stuff. That's great. And it's an alternative. If YouTube goes down, we can at least find ourselves there. RLM, Real Liberty Media. You don't think that's valuable? Wait till YouTube shuts down the access. Real Liberty Media is going to be the only portal at that point. So consider how these things, what you support, what you don't, what you're silent on, and what you move on. I think you can use their own words against them. I think that we can explain the weapons that are being used, that they all are hackable. And so this is the world we live in. But the fact that we're in this divisive nature, we're in a world of war. I don't care how you define it. I don't care if you call it left, right. I don't even have the titles in my mind. I keep going. Everyone has all these titles. They can go through a whole list of all the different types of divisions. I don't really have them in my mind. They're just an obstruction. I just don't even want to look at it. I know they're there. We're going to attack the problem, and this is all done because that division is a weapon. That division is a weapon, no different than the social media is a weapon. Everything you can see, the straw man is a weapon. Do you know how to use it, folks? Do you know? That's what I'm trying to show you, that they're taking to take this away. You make it an alternative, and if anybody you want to make a point, you slow down on what's going on, you look at the issue, and you take it to task. That's how this game starts to be played when you're trying to wrestle your own countries back into some measure of stability. Because the whole matter is to make it unstable and empower the one who's wielding the power behind the scenes. I don't even call it deep state. It's so beyond that, it's not even funny. So we're told a lot of things. The government's not there to help you. I've showed you the evidence of it today. We keep plugging into all this stuff. We keep relying on what we're told. The truth keeps coming out over time about how all our perceptions are incorrect. I've been on record for years to try and show you how those perceptions, at least the ones I hear generally, are incorrect, how to rethink about what's going on. I've been a proponent of the fact that you live in a war of the worlds is not a joke. This is the war of our world, and it's what we were born into. And every evidence is there to tell us that. Every evidence is there to be discussed, and I find it fascinating people are discussing it, and it's all coming back to what I've been talking about, but more importantly, what I saw back in the 90s. And I didn't see it in the 90s because it just started. That was what we started to do. This is before, like right at the time the internet started getting legs. I didn't even have access to it. I was still the old school. You have to go to a library to go read this stuff. In fact, my research for international law, Benedict's on Admiralty, was me walking down to a university law school library and got in the basement and started reading Excuse me, that Benedict's and Adamsley was up in the top. Then I went down. Once I read that, then I went down into the basement where the interesting documents are. And so this is all reading from real time, not the internet stuff. But here we have, I want to point out something to you all about how this all, in one category of facts that you establish, you proof it out, you can see what I've been saying, that the military consequence of our life, proven out over and over that they use these rules, the government is the tool of exploitation. And you can remain quiet on it, or you can engage it and see what you can do in order to slow it up and get more people to understand the dynamic of the oppression, so that more and more people start working on it, and it goes quicker and quicker, as opposed to what my experience has been, 30 years of hardly anybody understanding a damn thing, and in particular going into mining law and having the majority of the miners not understand or actually fight us, get mad at us for what we've produced over the last at least 8 years, 7, 8 years. It's really a phenomenon. I told you, the microcosm of the miner is the macrocosm we know as America, or any other nation of people. We are just our creatures of our frailties. It's pretty fascinating. And I really don't, like I said, I don't have any judgment on it. That's just who we are, how we respond. We respond through that's another sense of us that we respond through, another filter, like our eyes, our sense of touch, taste, smell, whatever. Our thought is a big one. But here we have more and more evidence, folks. I want to just go through this. Armed and dangerous. If police don't have to protect the public, what good are they? Very fascinating to me, and dismay almost that someone's coming up. This is written by John Whitehead. I have a lot of general agreement with John Whitehead. What I don't have is he's an attorney, and not that he's just the attorney, but you would have thought that this would have come out before, or he would have more of the remedies available that he doesn't. That we could be empowered by how to take action. And maybe I'm looking at that because this is just water under the bridge for me. And I was a little astonished to hear, and no judgment again. I don't want to have anybody think I'm picking on anybody who sounds like it's familiar to them. This is just the reality of how I hear. The realization that the police don't have to protect the public. Well, actually, they have to protect the public. This is even the wrong title. They don't have to protect you. And hearing people, it's all at the same time what's interesting too. All coming to that realization for true. I didn't really realize that. I didn't really believe that. Oh, I'm just realizing that is the truth. I've told you this forever. I've been ever able to do this. I've told it before I was on the internet. This was told to me and by others that had done research before me back in the middle 90s. Why? It's like this 30-year itch that comes around. All of a sudden, we're going to make a big promotion of it. My problem is those promotions end up going water under the bridge back into the memory hole. I want you all that are coming to terms, whether you end up thinking you heard it from me or not, and you think you hear it from somewhere else, let me focus on this for today. That the police don't have the duty to protect you. They have to protect the public, but the public is the government. When you understand how to read these words. So John Whitehead's discussion I would have issue with at that point, but not to argue with him. He's pointing out something. I don't know where everyone's getting their information now that they're finally realizing this is the fact, but I want to go through this whole point. You have to get this, and I want you to understand it in the context of the military consequence as well. Why you see the EPA reticent to move forward to not poison you and put you in a mental state by the chemical they put in, why the pharmaceuticals are there, why this oppression, why you're shot on sight anymore, as I told you was coming. With no remedy is the other thing. That's the killer one for me. I want to point out a couple things that may be missed in these discussions, but let me go through here a little bit. John Whitehead does a good article here. I don't want to condemn all that part. I just think it falls way short when it's already known. This is not even a question, and there's no relationship back before the fact of like the internet time. This is like the internet generation. It's just since 2005, like that's when the world started. And I guess it's a little bit of a gripe for me. You all think this is information just now coming out, or you just you don't listen to me. You listen, but you don't actually agree with me. You don't actually believe what I'm telling you. Is the fact. And why I come to my conclusions what I do and how I approach certain things is because this stuff is the fact. It's not just a fairy tale. The direness of the condition. We are so inculcated with what we were told. I'll just have to say it this way, you don't even know what critical thinking is. You do not know what critical thinking is. You have no way to reason it. And so I'm glad that people are coming onto the idea. And I always find it amazing. I see like handfuls of people coming to the same realization at the same time. It's like the 100th monkey issue, but so late in the game it seems. But thankful it's happening anyway. Police don't have to protect you. Now, I'll say that. It's, oh yeah, I know that. I don't know the cops. Don't call the cops. All that. I'm not talking about all that stuff. I'm talking about the foundation of this and why this is the fact and how it ties into everything I've been telling you that you really need to take seriously. You need to listen to what I'm saying. You can't let this stuff go for years by thinking, oh, that guy sounds okay, but I don't quite really get that. It doesn't impress me. You need to make this impressionable for yourself. That's the other thing they've done to us. We all get impressioned about things that are divisive, not things that would integrate your knowledge in yourself in order to start looking at the world, provide a basis to start critically thinking. He goes on, American police state. I've told you this is not the police, folks. This is a military state. And this is what I don't like about some of John Whitehead's stuff. It's like, it's diminutive of the actual condition, and the condition is the effect. It's not the cause either. And I'm not talking the esoteric ideas about what might be causing society to be where it is. It's been a plan, and I've told you that plan is our problem. And unless we develop the idea and bring apparent, not transparent, but bring it into view, this problem that we have to deal with, or this plan that we have to deal with, we're not going to address that problem. So he says the American police state, this police has a tendency to shoot first and ask questions later. In fact, police don't usually need much incentive to shoot and kill members of the public. And my point is it has nothing to do with incentive. It has to do with the way they actually know they're there. Like when I hear a government meeting, a county meeting, and the peanut gallery says, "But you work for us, so I pay my taxes pay for your position," and county commissioner will tell them, "No, I don't." And then the peanut gallery goes in a big uproar. They've heard the truth and they don't quite get it. That's what I don't like about this. We are told different terms for what's actually going on. It softens the blow. It's not as deep as it needs to be. They don't come at you just to kill you without incentive. There's a purpose behind their ability to think they can. It's the system that provides that insight to them, and it's your inaction to control it on the other side. And given that condition, it dictates how. You want to be told about how you don't want to do something? This is dictating to your life, and you don't even recognize it. The police have shot and killed Americans of all ages, many of them unarmed. Many of them unarmed. For standing in a certain way, moving a certain way, holding something, anything that police could misinterpret to be a gun, or igniting some trigger-centric fear in the police officer's mind that has nothing to do with the actual threat or safety. Haven't I told you all that paragraph, folks? Years and years and years. It's like it comes back and it's being regurgitated to tell you again through John Whitehead. There it is. And he goes on to tell you and explain to you in references the latest, which I thought was interesting. Now, before your outrage bubbles over because all these people are dying at the hands of the cops, consider the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed, parenthetically, most recently in 2005, that police have no constitutional duty to protect members of the public from harm. Police have no constitutional duty to protect the members of the public from harm. What have I told you before? The protect and serve is to protect and serve the public, which is the government. Now, protect and serve, the word is service, protected to serve you up into the process of that system, is what you're looking at in those statements. Community service is the community, not you. They're telling you the fact of this. This is long. He comes at 2005 like that's the beginning and the end of the universe. This is a long-standing trail of cases that I want you to be aware of, that we are completely oblivious to. When I'm telling you live in a military consequences, this is no joke. You go read that Libra code, and you start understanding this is the truth. that the Supreme Court, the judicial department branch of the government of the United States says there is no duty in the cops to protect you. And then I want you to go consider the Lieber Code. Who are they to protect? They secure themselves, don't they? So this word secure pops up pretty quick, and that's what you see. The government and the state government, they all do this security stuff, don't they? But they're securing themselves. This is where I get this stuff. Not this guy's article. Not from 2005. This is something I've been writing about. I had written about when I was writing since back in the middle 90s. And it's before that I just said. And I wanted to also point out again, this has to do with that creation of the United States itself. That when you look at the political jurisdiction that it was created under, that's essentially the commerce, certainly after the peace treaty. The Treaty of Peace. That was a commerce compact at some level. It was. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. It was a treaty, too. Prior engagements entered into, shall this Constitution be subject to? Okay, it's all written out if we just look at it. This becomes the basis for what you're seeing now. Because the military protects the bottom line. Right? It's commerce construction. And I want to put, as I say that, I'm going to give the caveat. In the set of facts that I can present to you, that's the thought and the proof. Set up a different way, we come up to a different type of oppression cause. Each one, depending on how it comes at you, will be how is the lineage, the path you try to go attack it back through. So John Whitehead comes out and tells you again that there's no police. I'm surprised that this thing kind of blew up lately. A lot of people are now taking notice. I don't know what happened when I said it. And this is the kind of interesting thing I laugh about a little bit. It's kind of a sad laugh that what do I sound like that no one actually listens to me? Actually, I mean, really listens to me. What is in our minds that we don't listen to this important stuff and we won't actually dig in, roll up our sleeves like I say we have to do, and go find out the fact of this? That when I hear lots of people coming down and saying, oh man, now I'm seeing it. I'm finally seeing it. I'm elated that you're seeing it. I'm disappointed that you didn't see it, 9 years ago when I started talking about it. Again, those of you that have listened to me this long. So, he's writing about this thing. I'm telling you it's not the police state. It's a military state. Every evidence shows that it is. They want to say that you see that propaganda of the United States presenting the Constitution as something to be secure by utilizing the cops in America, and then you see them roll out the military to support them, and then you feed into the concept that the police are heroes. Now, anybody listening on this broadcast that has been conducive in the religion of RLM, I'm singing to the choir. You already think you know this stuff. And that's your attitude about it. Just out of turn, you just say, yeah, they're crooks. They're killers. Stay away from them. Don't call them. All that. I'm not talking about those obvious responses. I'm talking about getting the deeper understanding and start to work from there. Not be surprised. Not come to the awesome realization that you live in an open-air prison and then have to deal with that. Once you see that, you have a whole lot of thought that's going to go on in your head. I just know it. It did for me. It does for anybody else that finally sees this stuff. It's like your head will just, that's real. I didn't believe that was real, but there it is. That's real. John Whitehead talked about patriotism, the misplaced myth, that and the other. I agree with all that. You can do all that. You can talk about it all. The reality is, you look at your local government, you think it's supposed to sit there to keep the peace, as I would say, underneath the law. That's their obligation. But they don't, do they? They went from keeping the peace to law enforcement. Well, what's the law? Well, it's policy. Go look at any state statute. Go look at the laws of the United States. Some are policy and some are law. The law actually attaches to grounded, foundational obligations and duties. All the rest is this big policy consideration. But it acts as law. Like your money acts as money. It's all consistent. I've told you this all for years. So the realization by many people now, I guess this in the last week or two, well, heck, this is real, that the police have no duty to protect you, notwithstanding what they say. It's just exposure to the lie. And you better come to terms with that. It doesn't mean you go out and go railing against them with a sign out in the street. It means you have to rethink your condition in this battlefield, essentially. And so I saw the first sentences of this article, and I said, he's just going to promote his book at the end, and sure enough, he promotes his book at the end. Because he frames it in the police state and American battlefield. He presents the beginning to be the promotion at the end. Partly why I don't like some of this. Partly why I'm a little bit averse to what he brings up. But totally consistent with being able to get us closer to the deeper truths that I've been trying to tell you about to understand the condition. There's a reason why you can't rely on what you see. There's a reason why I tell you how to respond to these things. They are dictated to me to tell you by the nature of the foundation of the law or oppression from which they are created. And I told you the foundation for me in that was international law. How I started there, I'll never tell you. That's the inspiration. It's the inspiration that comes to you when you finally dedicate yourself. You're directed where you need to go. And then it's up to you to keep it true. Not truth, just keep it true for you. So let me go through this thing about the police, if you had any idea, and I'm going to get to a spot because it creates a secondary proof for why you don't live where you think you live. You ought to live there, and we were told to keep ourselves living there, but we didn't. And here's the proof of how this all works. And from these things, lots of the administrative oppression devolves from a lot of this. And until you truly understand and see this, you think what I'm telling you is just so much opinion or a good idea or sounds right to you or just the next thought that you can impose your thoughts on what I say, do it your way instead of what I'm saying. And this is what I notice a lot of people do. You'll hear what I'm saying, but you don't understand how to apply it. You just interject yourself over the top of what I'm saying. And a lot of times I just have to not respond because there's so much to try to untie there that it would take too long. And as I said before, I can untie that in a matter, well, it takes a few hours, but I can untie that pretty quickly when you have a problem. When you got the monkey on your back, I can untie all your misgivings pretty quickly. But now you're focused. See, that's the thing. When you have to deal with your problem, and I'm sitting there to show you how your perception was wrong, how you need to change it, and where that change needs to happen, we commit your own praxis to your own ignorance of a condition as you may have rightfully thought you were correct, but you find out real quickly that you're not. You won't have an argument with me in the last moment. When you're on the 2-inch line of your own goal line, and you got one play to do, one play left, pretty soon you start paying attention. Is the kind of attention you need to listen to me with. Because if you were really listening without interjecting on me, what you think it is, you'd see this a lot clearer. But let me move on to where the Supreme Court, but 2005, not the 1990s. We keep going back, and we can go and find the resources, and I'll have some links for you if you want to do some back research study. Another report, though, just from the New York Times, Justice Rule, Police do not have constitutional duty to protect someone. Well, that was the story that they talked about in the article to show you that the article's there. And what was interesting about this one is, but the majority on Monday saw little difference between the earlier case and this one, Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. Mrs. Gonzalez did not have a property interest in enforcing the restraining order, Justice Scalia said, adding that such a right would not, of course, resemble any traditional conception of property. If you don't think property is important regarding the action of the government. And remember what the limitation in Libra Code was. It was that they have to be cognizant of the property, not to destroy it, and they have to pay compensation when they do. If you cannot describe a property interest, even an interest, I'm saying the property's there, but you do not have the right to move against these people. And the only place I've read that limitation is in the Libra Code. So you reason what that might mean if you deny everything else. You reason what I've been telling you about property, why it's so important to focus on these things. Not as a question and not as a thing that you're going to wave a flag on, but what you assert up front. You identify it, assert it, and you come right at these guys, right between the eyes. Although the protective order did mandate an arrest, and an arrest warrant is in so many words, Justice Scalia said, a well-established tradition of police discretion has long coexisted with apparently mandatory arrest statutes. Now we're into police discretion. Where'd you hear that? But in the Lieber Code. And I'm not saying that's the originating document. I'm saying that's an objective basis that pre-exists all of this nonsense long time ago that gave us the guidelines if we were paying attention. That the Supreme Court is paying attention to. Now we got discretion. Where's that? That's subjective, isn't it? And then they have their little rules on how they apply it. And now we come down to the day when we start hearing now the fact of it. If they say the magic words, they've been within their discretion. They have immunity. Well, where's immunity in the Constitution? And when you don't see it in the Constitution, maybe you're not under it. Pretty simple. You need to read these stories and show and understand. They referred to a case before in the Castle Rock. These cases go back. It's been so long. Most of us were born into this decision that today we're coming in the 2018 just realizing that the government has no duty to protect you. It has no duty to protect you. Doesn't then Title 50 make more sense, and they can make any decision to do whatever in their interest to secure them? You need to think deeply on this, how this reasoning works out. It may not be the only reasoning, but it certainly is one that you have to not disregard and not impose what you thought the world was like when these people are telling you different. Whether you agree with this or not, this is how you're going to be treated with by these people. Just Dial 911, The Myth of Police Protection, written in 1999. Underlying all gun control ideology is the one belief: private citizens don't need firearms because police will protect them from crime. That belief is both false and dangerous for two reasons. This was written by Richard Stevens, a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and the author of Dial 911 and Die. First, the police cannot and do not protect everyone from crime. Second, the government and the police in most localities owe no legal duty to protect individuals from criminal attack. And I want you to remember that, because there's a case I'm going to bring up and read part from that shows you where the states will put you in a condition that you are the victim. They have no duty to protect you from criminal attack, and then they take away the means of your defense. I want you to I'm saying that now early. I want you to just put that in the back of your mind. And if you don't understand what this condition, this occupying condition is, and who's been running the show, not who, but how they've been running the show, if you try to interject your thoughts over what I say, or think you're thinking like I've been saying, and then you come down the road to now realize what I've been saying, then someone else tells you that this is what I've been saying is the truth. You've delayed your awareness all that time. So I ask you, you do have to do the study, but do it. And you do have to prove me wrong, because I don't think I am. In any great way, in any effectual way. Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I don't have anybody address that. No, I just get the blatherers, that have no, I can just tell that you have no clue, those that come at me like that. Okay, let me read back on this. When it comes to deterring crime and defending against criminals, individuals are ultimately responsible for themselves and their loved ones. Depending solely on police emergency response means relying on the telephone as the only defensive tool. Too often, citizens in trouble dial 911 and die. Statistics confirm the obvious truth that the police in America cannot prevent violent crime. He goes through a bunch of numbers. I don't want to read all that. He goes and talks about how the government's not there. I've told you before, you all know this. The cops come and take a report. Deal with the body and take a report. And practically speaking, it makes little sense to disarm the innocent victims while the criminals are armed. It is especially silly to disarm the victims when too often the police are simply unable to protect them. Police do very little to prevent violent crime. We investigate crime after the fact, stated by Richard Mack, former sheriff of Graham County, Arizona. You may know him in the Patriot circles. He was telling us a little bit of the truth of it. Wherever he went, I don't know. They got their own squabble going. Everyone gets a squabble, it seems. But the point is, there's the truth sitting right there. Americans increasingly believe, however, that all they need to do for protection is a dial 911, and the police, the fire, and the ambulance will come straight to the rescue. It's faster than pizza, man. Faith in the telephone number and local cops is so strong that Americans dial 911 over 250,000 times per day. And this gentleman doesn't talk about the fact that that's UN-inspired 911. Enhanced 911 is even more tied into the international order. Did you know that? I talked about it before. No one seems to hear me. Memory hole stuff, I guess, just washes under that bridge. You start keeping this in your mind, you start tying it together, it's hard to come to a different conclusion based on this set of facts. The article goes on to have a heading of no duty to protect. It's not just that the police cannot protect you, they don't even have to come when you call. In most states, the government and the police owe no legal duty to protect individual citizens from criminal attack. The District of Columbia's highest court spelled out plainly the, quote, fundamental principle that a government and its agents are under no general duty to provide public services such as police protection to any particular individual, close quote. In the especially gruesome landmark case of no duty rule got ugly. Just before dawn of March 16, 1975, two men broke down the back door of a three-story home in Washington, D.C., shared by three women and a child. On the second floor, one woman was sexually attacked. Her housemates on the third level heard screams and called police. The woman's first calls to D.C. police got assigned to a low priority, so the responding officers arrived at the house, got no answer to the doors they knocked on, and did a quick check around and left. When the woman frantically called the police a second time, the dispatcher promised help would come, but no officers were even dispatched. I want you to understand here, as I said before, you're a victim, and then the government, who offers no guarantee to protection, takes away your ability to protect yourself. And that's okay. If you think that this world, this America that we have is so great, I want you to reconsider this in real. Take it inside and understand. I'm not telling you jokes. Wish I could. I'm not telling you jokes here. And I'm not talking just to waste my breath. These people come around, and they give you this disclosure, this presentation like they're here to protect you. And the court cases, now we're back to 1975. And it gets before this, so keep going. We're going to keep going. And I want to show you something in one of the prior cases, one of the beginning cases that start to explain this to us. But to understand, that's also after 1954 as well. Another case, and 1938 as well. So, the attackers kidnapped, robbed, raped, and beat all three women over 14 hours. When these women later sued the city and its police for negligently failing to protect them or even able to answer their second call, the court held the government had no duty to respond to their call to protect them. Case dismissed. You can read more. This article goes on and on. You need to see it. You need to see it in all its horrific truth and glory. Goes on and on, naming lots of cases. So, I'm going to go and take one of those cases, or maybe not one of those cases. One that I found, I was thinking I had seen this discussion back in the 90s, but again, memory hole stuff even for me, I didn't keep all this stuff. I just was looking at what am I dealing with here, finding out these were the truths. You're imposed upon by these guys with discretion, these cops that have discretion, and they owe no duty, and yet they're there in your face. They certainly have a duty to bring revenue into the state, don't they? It sure seems like it, because they're law enforcers and not peace officers anymore. Another story that highlights more articles from that 1999 article was a PDF I found that speaks even to more, and this is where I see more cases. These have highlight and bolded PDF. I can't describe it to you. You can get it in the blogcaster links. That this now highlights more cases. And so that got me into thinking, or maybe I can research for the earlier case than even 75 or even before the ones I didn't remember. I found another story. Police have no duty to protect individuals. Now remember, the word individuals is even tainted here. Let's just say you, the listener, not the legal status. That commerce entity, that legal entity individual, not a corporation. How's that? See how they did that? You can't even use the word individual. Anyway, the titles do. I want you to see through that. Because we're looking at the point that there is no governmental duty to protect you. It's to protect the public. That's the government. And you see that again in the Lieber Code. They secure themselves. And when you see that, it says, number one, when you see that, you know you're in that condition. You knows them when you sees them. Article 1 of the Lieber Code. You don't have to profess themselves to be the military occupation. You just knows it when you sees it. Indeed, indeed. Self-reliance for self-defense, police protection isn't enough, was the article. The subtext, all of our lives, especially during our younger years, we hear that the police are there to protect us from the very first kindergarten class visiting of Officer Friendly. That was a program, a propaganda program, to the very last time we saw a police car, most of which have the protect and serve emblazoned on the doors. We're encouraged to give ourselves over to police protection. But it hasn't always been that way. So, before the mid-1800s, American and British citizens, even in large cities, were expected to protect themselves and each other. Indeed, they were legally required to pursue an attempt to apprehend criminals. The notion of police force in those days was abhorrent in England and America, where liberals viewed it as a form of dreaded standing army. And right now I've been telling you we have this standing army that's been fortified by the U.S. military as a standing army. You use your state so-called National Guard as a standing army, and I hear crickets. You don't believe me when I'm telling you the police aren't there to serve you. They'll serve you up, but they're not to serve you. And there's no obligation. This is not even a question in the law. England's first police force in London was not instituted until 1827. That's an interesting time relative to the historical adjustments that were going on right after 1900s, and we see the fruition of all that through 1913 into 1932 in the Great Depression era. In 1938, a whole set of laws gets changed over, and by 1946, you're in an administrative condition. The problem is the war was declared against you back in Lincoln's time. He was a lawyer, remember? Just a lawyer. The first such forces in America followed in New York, Boston, Philadelphia during the period from 1835 and 1845. They were established only to augment citizen self-protection. It was never intended to act affirmatively prior to or during criminal activity or violence against individual citizens. Their duty was to protect society as a whole by deterrence, i.e., by systematically patrolling, detecting, or apprehending criminals after the occurrence of crimes. There was no thought of police displacing citizens' right of self-protection, nor could they, even if it were intended. So there's been a big shift. We've now handed all the power we're supposed to keep to ourselves over to the government. And they took it. And they took it in the way that governments only know how to, by a military force. Remember, the Constitution shows military being established within the federal government. That's all it has. Remember? I don't know why this is a big question, but apparently it has been. That's where I thought about it. And not to point it out, one of our broadcast hosts on Real Liberty Media, I think, was also made a comment. I don't know the source of it, but that's why another peaked. I had this on my tabs, and that peaked up too. Some of our own hosts are kind of astonished about this point, and I'm surprised about that. But that's neither here nor there. There's truths right in front of us that it's just under our radar for whatever reason that I've been attempting to try and bring on top. It's not under the radar. It's not transparent to us. It sets a whole other table, if you will. If you're going to eat at this table, then maybe than what you ordered up or thought someone ordered up. Again, this article can go on and on. Information that you actually need. Here's another tons and tons of links to court cases and stories and reports of the courts coming in to explain over and over and over that the government has no duty, notwithstanding what they tell you. And I just as it's occurred, someone told me here recently there's going to be a sheriff's runoff in a county near me, and the candidate that's going to attempt to overthrow the incumbent says the sheriff's department is a business and it has to be run like a business. Should tell you tons. And there's a proof for that. And so he's not telling you a lie either. But I don't think everybody understands what he just said. and that's exactly the problem. They're a private entity that's run like a business, is a business, runs like a business, and they're out there just doing what? Imposing themselves. And so my first thought, and I'm sure it's been a couple of other people's first thought, well, if it's a private business and they're just imposing themselves, then I have the right of being free from interference. Can I just tell you to go away? Well, there's a clue there. You can. But will they? That's the criminal. Now, I tell you, you see that, you better develop a word in your mouth on how to construct your record to get that out and to counter these military officers. That's about the only thing you have, because I don't think anybody with any brains would say, well, at that point, I guess I get to bring out my weaponry and I can alter and abolish that government agent as I see fit. You know, that ain't going to work. Lunacy. So you're not living underneath that Constitution or its guidances, and this story, these reports will tell you how long ago that got taken away. And I'm telling you what the cause is before that. And the guidance is in the Libra Code, and you can just directly apply it to this condition. This report goes on, talks about a case called Warren versus District of Columbia. Even that was too soon for me. So what I do is I go check, and I found a case. It's not even the oldest one I thought that I knew. I didn't have that much time. And I want you to get the link and read this case. But in particular, I want to read a part. It was a dissent by a judge. It was called RISS, R-I-S-S, versus the City of New York. And again, the City of New York is a very, very, very interesting place regarding all the imposition of legal coming from, it's emanating from here, this area, out into the nation. Again, to keep all these historical facts together, you start to see other pictures being developed, other facts being developed to you reason with. You can bring stuff together to fortify, confirm your whys of the background, the foundation for how this develops. And the court in a dissent, let me see if I can find it, I think it was Keating here, the judge, I'm into the case. This is one of those cases that said that the government owes no duty. Here's a dissenting judge making a conversation. And I'm using this because this was one of the styles of cases. I may have read this case a long, long time ago, but it came in a group of cases in a whole bunch. It's replete. You read all this stuff, you start seeing the anomaly. On the one hand, there's no duty. On the other hand, they take away your abilities. This case is it's a sadness that comes over me when I realize how duped we are about what we thought was going on. And this dissent touches on that very clearly. When she says here, this judge, no one questions the proposition that first duty of government is to assure its citizens the opportunity to live in personal security. And no one who reads the record of Linda's ordeal can reach a conclusion other than the City of New York, acting through its agents, completely and negligently failed to fulfill this obligation to Linda. Now understand, the obligation to Linda was denounced by the majority of this case. So keep that out, but understand, I want to get to the point. This judge is saying there was an obligation to Linda under the state's representation. The judge goes on to write, Linda has turned to the courts of this state for redress, asking that the city be held liable in damages for its negligent failure to protect her from harm. With compelling logic, she can point out that if a stranger, who had absolutely no obligation to aid her, had offered her assistance, and thereafter Barton Pugash was able to injure her as a result of the negligence of the volunteer, the courts would certainly require him to pay damages. Citing Restatement of Tort Section 323. Why then would the city, whose duties are imposed by law and include the prevention of crime, New York City Chapter Section 435, and consequently extend far beyond that of the Good Samaritan, not be responsible? If a private detective acts carelessly, no one could deny that a jury could find such conduct unacceptable. Why then is the city not required to live up to at least the same minimum standards in professional competence, not incompetent, professional competence, which would be demanded of a private detective? Linda's reasoning seems so eminently sensible that surely it must come as a shock to hear, and to every citizen to hear, the city argue to learn that this court decides that the city has no duty to provide police protection to any given individual. What makes the city's position particularly difficult to understand is that in conformity with the dictates of law, Linda did not carry any weapon for self-defense. Citing Formal Penal Law, Section 1897. Section 1897. Thus, by a rather bitter irony, she was required to rely for protection on the city of New York, which now denies all responsibility to her. It is not a distortion to summarize the essence of the city's case here in the following language. Because we owe a duty to everybody, we owe it to nobody. Were it not for the fact that this position has been hollowed by much ancient and revered precedent, we would surely dismiss it as preposterous. To say there is no duty is, of course, to start with the conclusion. The question is whether or not there should be liability for negligent failure to provide adequate police protection. I'll end there. You can read it when you get the link or have it when you go search out. Let me go back up to the fact that this is a if question by this judge. I'm telling you, there is no such condition that she was anticipating applicable to people. This is only applicable to, it's not even the sovereign. It's applicable to an oppressor, a conqueror, an occupying force. If we applied normal stuff, these people couldn't do this, but we can't apply normal things. We also know that we can impose upon the captors of our occupation the ability that they cannot protect themselves, and therefore is not able to protect themselves when we do not fulfill what their expectation is that we promoted in them, that we could protect them, is something that should terrify you. If you haven't understood this, dynamic, I don't know how you can critically think about the world around you at this point. When you come to terms with the totally incongruous condition, when you finally start to make sense of it, you're going to, I'm sure, have to come into conformity with more of what I've been saying, if not exactly. Or you will, please, find the other source that would be reasonable to come to terms to come to what the condition is. I need to see that myself, because I need to get off of this thing that looks like a vast truth to me. But this is from 1958. And they're talking about ancient precedent. I'm astonished that Whitehead says the last one was 2005. It's totally dismissing this whole condition of the world, folks. Just to keep expanding it back. I keep telling you, this thing gets deeper and wider, and no matter how far you go, and it's not a pretty picture. I told you at times it's really devastating to actually start to think about this very deeply. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, when I read it and realized, as I describe it here, it's other things, but this one, it's the manual of your defects, and someone knows that, and they can exploit that. When that settled in me deeply, it just devastated me for about 4 days. But I rise up. Notwithstanding that, there was no insight. With that new awareness, I could now put that part in the equation of my analysis of the reality that I and we are in. And I guess as I think about, that's why I have maybe not much tolerance for those that are in positions like a John Whitehead, who's an attorney who can see it, who can actually say all this stuff is there, tell you about it, which is the great thing, but not actually move forward to empower you, maybe better than me. But not at all? Just to tell you a story, just to sell a book? Just to keep you stuck in the oppression that you're in? That, I guess, is the underlying problem for me with all this stuff, most all this stuff. Oh, you can do your documentary, keep talking about it, folks. Even if you're 100% right, you're not going to do it right. And so that's my problem. Let me get back to the point. They disarm you and enable you and disable you, and that's still okay. Should be frightening to those of you that believe there's a Second Amendment right. And what goes on with all this behind the scenes of how they manipulate you out of this thing, this idea that you have this right. That it does anything is the other problem. It could do something, but as I've told you, that's the last answer. That's the last answer. And there's no determination of the outcome. And if we have one example in history in the United States of America where people did do that, Lincoln resolved that against us. Back to Lieber Code again. I can't get back around here. And what eventuates outside of that is there's no duty in the military to protect you. It will protect itself, and it can set up a condition that you are disabled, because if you're disabled, then you're no threat to it. Again, to the security of those that have no duty to you, that you have told yourself that they do. Talk about straw men. Fascinating thing what we do to ourselves. I did it myself. But somehow I got onto this. Well, I guess when you get 5 guns stuck in your face, and you don't know in the next second if you're gonna exist, you become like all the other things we've heard since then. All the other people that died at the hand of stupid cops thinking that they had some protection, that they needed to protect themselves. And I'm asking, where'd America go? This is not the America I was told. That's right. The stark reality was, I was just now seeing it for the first time. It wasn't the way we were told. That's where I start my journey to come to today. And so I get a little dismayed that I've been talking all these things, and to hear handfuls and handfuls of people finally coming to terms with, it really is that the government doesn't have no duty to protect you. No duty and obligation. Think about that. I talk to you all the time. You've got to find a duty and obligation before you get a handle on them. Well, if they have no duty and obligation, how do you get a handle on them? That's an interesting question. Neat puzzle trick, and it's possible. If you listen very carefully with the last judge, they actually bring up a doctrine that's developed. It's the special relationship doctrine. Now, I use it a little bit differently. I don't speak to it, I just use it. And I can't get into it because it's a matter of it's a factual presentation. What you establish is fact that you can use. Essentially, it is and it's not actually dealt with as far as the doctrine that you create a special agreement with the cops that they essentially undertake to protect you. Well, there's a different way to do that, in that they weren't supposed to attack you. Remember, these freedom of association and freedom from association, there's also this duty that they have to do certain things by commission or omission. I talk about all this stuff all the time. You have to figure out in this set of circumstances where they can disarm you and that be okay, and have someone else attack you and that be okay when they don't come to help. You have to stick yourself in that environment and say, how am I going to prevail anyway? In the initiation of that problem, you cannot go to other things. In other words, let's say the law that disarmed you may be invalid. Did you go attack that first? Did you look at the consequences that they've established against you, the battlefield they've put against you that looks like it's law that may not be so? That's presumed only. Everything. Only policy, only presumption, at its best. I tell you to argue at the property side, and there's no ability for the occupier to violate it. That's getting them out in a different way. The special relationship is their duty to uphold the law. They promise to do it through their contract, not yours. I keep saying, look through the statutes as their guidance, what they were supposed to do. I got a lot of that from this type of a story here, where you see that the cops have no duty to protect you, and then they disarm you, and you have you're a victim then. How do you combat that? That's where my thoughts come from, is stories. These are case law precedents. Longer than most of us have been cognizant of any capacity. They're listening to me. Some got close. Some had capacity right about this time, but many didn't. So then we hear, and we wonder why we hear this disarming condition, how they can do this and why. Oh, we got a Second Amendment right. And you guys don't even pay attention. You just stand on these words without even understanding the condition. In light of this case alone, saying you can be disarmed in face of a lack of duty to protect you, and the third-party stakeholder can come in and beat you down, kill you, hurt you, whatever, and that's okay. Don't you hear Title 50 written all over this? The EPA giving you fluoride? I mean, it's just I don't see the distinction here, but it's just the tool, the weapon they use against you. That the court's saying that they don't have any duty to protect you, and they can let harm befall you. It's Title 50 and the exceptions to the government. But what is that? That's the War Department statutes. So we hear people surprised about this. I don't know. A guy comes out promoting Democrats and then gets elected as a president. Trump tells lawmakers he will outlaw bump stocks quickly. Well, my point's not even on all that either when I get to this point. The bump stocks is that stock that's on the rifle that uses the ejection, the pushback from the expulsion of the projectile to push on a stock to give you recoil, return on the trigger. You just hold your finger over the trigger, and the bump stock moves back and forth under the bullet coming out, and it lets you pull that trigger way faster because it's just a response to the projectile coming out and the kickback of the gun, the inertia going back. That makes it more automatic. It's not automatic. It just makes it function like it is. Bullets come out as fast as you tune the pressure between the pushback and the pressure on the stock. That's what they claim in this Florida thing is what happened. Now, I haven't seen any proof of any of this, but Trump comes out and says that bump stocks will be outlawed. And this got a whole bunch of discussion over, well, why don't you just outlaw the cars that drunks drive and all this other nonsense that comes out. The point is I think we're missing the big deal. Why are they even talking about this? The Second Amendment, if it was actually relevant, says shall not be infringed. Keep and bear. No, there's no registration requirements, but you see the courts have come in to explain to you something else. They can make you a victim and they have no duty to protect you. The only condition I know that the proof of that sits in the Libra Code, that condition. So, he wants to immediately outlaw bump stocks. Well, it's interfering with your right to bear arms and the type of arm. For what? For what? Deer hunting? No. It was to protect yourself against the very government making these rules that Trump is on board with to disarm you and disaffect you in that capacity, even if it is the last capacity. I wrote a Twitter against this. I want to remind you all. I just put these things up on the Twitter just to kind of remind me. Actually, I'm using them right now. I claim I made this statement: shall not be infringed without due process. Let's think about that, if we must. And see the 2010 murder memo. Extrajudicial executive expedience is what it relies on. I've talked to you all about this, and when did I report on that? 2012 or so? He wants to get rid of bump stocks. He also goes on and talks about making new rules for how you're supposed to get a gun. And he said he wants to take out anybody who wants the guns be taken from you before you've been due process has been given to you to prove that you shouldn't have a gun. Given the new rules that we have to live under. And I say, how are you not violated that to take away the due process and rely on due process this after the fact? That's a violation of a prohibition, and that's even worse violation than violating the patent grant stuff. If all of y'all would just kind of lay that out for yourself, but that condition is even thought about should bother you. But what is it? It's this condition. We can make you disarm you and let a third party harm you, and we have no duty to that. Our only duty is to ourselves. And another propaganda piece that popped up, another thing that goes on all around this gun thing in the Florida. And I'm going to get to something here that I've talked about before too, and I mentioned it already in the past. I mentioned the stakeholder thing. Right? This all comes to fruition, how this works. And it's all the spaghetti western we live in. But Feinstein can't contain her glee in gun control meeting with Trump. There was a meeting. Apparently it was the first, maybe it was the first reality show episode. I can't quite tell, but Trump says he wants Senator Feinstein's gun control provisions in her bill to be put in part of the one that's being proposed right now because of Florida. And all this outrage that came, and all these students that were eating Tide Pods last week, and now they're doing gun control policy this week. Completely oblivious to the prohibition, and everybody seems to be, but it's in spirit in the patriots who don't know what the heck's going on. This comes out in the news, I think it was the first reality show episode, that Feinstein gets all giddy over Trump saying, I want your provisions put in this bill. Well, I think that's all political gamemanship. So she gets all giddy. Trump says he's working together bipartisan. It's going to go through the process. That's going to be all cut back out. All right. The problem is they're doing gun control stuff. But look very carefully on the parts of it. They can only touch certain parts they think, and I don't think that's been challenged as well. So my response to this thing where Trump says using Florida regarding now bump stocks and going to put Feinstein's thing, my observation on all this is, and I wrote this to Trump through Twitter, which means it won't go anywhere, but I did it anyway. Stop scapegoating guns for government causes and blaming the innocent, Donald Trump. How about making sure the findings in this report are impeccably implemented before infringing that which shall not be infringed? We'll talk then. Hashtag stop government inflicted wounds. The link I give is to a document by the Secret Service that explains how you stop and what the method, the things that you have to look for to stop school shootings. Done in like 2000. So when you see this stuff going on and they're doing this machinations in front of you over the control, making you a victim, withstanding your rights, you realize you're not in a constitutional republic. I submit you're looking at a military consequence, and Trump is part of that group. However, he gets there, whatever his concept is, that's how it's working. They won't look to solve the real problem. They're just going to make more work to propose or to bring and realize the agenda, the global agenda, essentially. And so what do we hear? We hear the crack in the porcelain of the prohibition against interfering with keeping and bearing. Florida Senate revokes 2-year ban on AR-15s minutes after it passes. Dangerous games, play stupid games with stupid prizes. But Florida, based on this thing in Florida, this school shooting, whatever it was, doesn't matter to me. This is what they're using. They're now made a gun control issue. It could have been a joke. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, folks, they're 21-17 was the vote. It's not, this joke is going to turn to permanence about this over what? Over what is all this over? And then this little article pops up as a question. Why did it take 2 weeks to reveal Parkland students astroturfing? Now, I don't know why they use this term. This is just another one that's popped up. The astroturfing is a cause. Someone that's not a part of the cause using somebody else in order to advance their cause through the ones they're using. What have I talked to you about the Stalkinghorse? If you didn't notice this gun activity, this anti-gun activity that came up, and didn't think that there was an organization, here's the story that's going to point to you. What you saw after the Parkland shooting to advance this new control thing nationwide immediately was a plan. What I wanted to point out, they call it astroturfing. I call it the Stalkinghorse. And remember, this is UN, so what did they use? What are they using? Again, it's consistent. They're using the children, aren't they? The children need protection to advance the knot in the barrel of your pistol. This promotion was too well oiled. They made a mistake. It went too well oiled. And someone actually caught it and wrote it down for you. That this is what I've been talking about. This is what the system does to diminish your capacity. This is what the military occupation does to not cause you to go to war with it. And I don't mean necessarily by guns, but by any manner. I mean, is it clear enough, folks, as how consistent this is all doing and you're being played? I don't hear many people talking about this stuff. It really astonishes me. And I think part of this is you don't really believe what I'm telling you is really deeply what I've been saying. And I don't really care how long it takes you to get it. When you get the point, you finally see it. But we are in the late days, it seems. This is the 21-17 in Florida didn't mean much. It was a big joke. It seemed I think they were playing games. But it shows you how close this issue is and how much the victim you are being played for and will be, and the courts have already allowed us back in 1958 that's quite fine. And the government has no obligation to any one of you, none of you, just to promote itself and its things. And it's a global thing that's been going on. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said gets you more aware of what's going on and maybe get you activated, put you in some deep thought, get some reconsideration going on. Thank you, Grimner, for what you do at reallibertymedia.com. Folks, donate. I think we just met the requirements this year, and maybe a little bit more would be helpful. Jules at USCY.tv, thank you very much, and Minds and BitChute, thank you. Appreciate all that support and the sharing and all that reminding and all that goes on there. I'll be with you next week, tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.